Moving on then, 1.1 is all about identifying legislation in relation to health and safety in the learning environment. Now, a few bits of legislation which are really fundamental in us managing anything in relation to health and safety within an educational environment, and we have popped them up for you here on your PowerPoint. Now, the first one is the Health and Safety at Work Act, a huge act which obviously covers every industry you could possibly think of. Now, there's going to be lots of information within the Health and Safety at Work Act which aren't necessarily going to be relevant to us within the industry that we work in, but a lot of the policy and procedures that you're coming across within your schools obviously are drawn down from that act, from that piece of legislation. So it's really important within your assignment that you go back to and reference the Health and Safety at Work Act. RIDDLE. So we're just talking about making those reports to the Health and Safety Executive. RIDDLE stands for Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences Regulations, okay? And basically a RIDDLE report is what you submit to the Health and Safety Executive. You can do a paper copy and send it in, but the best way to do it now, of course, with everything is online. So you go on to the HSE website, you'll find a link to create your RIDDLE report, fill in all the information that you need to, send it off to HSE, the Health and Safety Executive. Okay, now there is a really clear-cut list on that website of what is reportable under RIDDLE legislation. And again, you can go and select the industry that you're from, so you can select education and get some good examples of things that have been reported in the past, and it can help you make a really good decision on whether you need to report or not. My advice always in practice is, if in doubt, report. Okay. Management and storage of medicines, the Children and Families Act 2014. So if we think about it, particularly from some specialist schools, I'm thinking about Mayfield, there are going to be children who actually have quite a wide range of medication that they need to be administered to them by specialist trained staff within the school environment, and a lot of those medications are going to need quite specific storage. Obviously, we need to think about the labelling and containment and control of giving out those medications, but also the storage, so making sure that they are checked regularly, that the only people accessing them are those people who are trained to do so, and the only people who they're being administered to are the children or young people that they are meant for. So this is really important, because actually if we get it wrong, it could have quite serious implications for not only the children but also for the staff as well. Okay, management of health and safety at work regulations. Okay, so these things are really going to, or our legislation here really helps to draw out the policies and procedures that we are used to working in. So things like lone working, things like who is going to be managing and administering first aid, for example, manual handling, lifting, the way that we store equipment, all of the things that potentially could lead to a dangerous occurrence in effect. Okay, so following that legislation there is actually really going to help us to create safe learning environments to keep ourselves safe and ultimately the children that we care for. Health and safety and welfare workplace regulations. These regulations talk about safe working practices. They'll talk about how it's safe for us to work, who we need to be with, our desk height, all of those exciting things. But it also thinks about the environment in general. Okay, so things like the heating, things like having the correct number of toilets. The Department of Education also adds another layer on top of this as well, because obviously these regulations have been written for a diverse range of industry. So we need to drill down further when we come to education, because we need to think about the end service users, and for us it's children and a vulnerable cohort of people. So we need to be very specific still. But ultimately, those policies and procedures that mean we have our physical care needs being met within our educational establishments, and we're making sure our environments are always safe, off or on site, come from these workplace regulations. Okay, so Kathy, in her tech wizardry, has created a PowerPoint for you that if you go and press the buttons on it, it will magically give you some information behind it, which is absolutely fantastic. Okay, so some really good information for you. Of course, we always encourage you to go ahead and do some wider reading and research. but you have a good amount of information here if you wanted to just use this as an overview, just to springboard you to go and find maybe some additional detail. Okay, going on then from 1.1, we also have additional legislation here in little lovely diamond shapes, and if you press on each one, it takes you to a hyperlink where you can find out a little bit more about each piece of legislation. We've got keeping children safe in education and working together to safeguard children, which you're going to be completely up to speed with, as you are all going to be done with your safeguarding unit as of tomorrow. Hooray! Just a quick note though on the PowerPoint, because I don't want to mess with this wonderful tech wizardry, I've not gone and updated the most up-to-date date for those two bits of legislation, because I didn't want to tamper with the hyperlinks, all right? But please note, here's my disclaimer, that keeping children safe in education and working together to safeguard children is actually 2019, not 2018 as listed on the PowerPoint. We've got the Human Rights Act, that's on there. We've got the UNCRC, which is the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child. We've got the Prevent Duty and the Fundamental British Values, the Children's Act, and what to do if you're worried that a child is being abused. Okay, so some of those acts and legislation you will be quite comfortable with, and some of them might be new to you. So use the little hyperlinks as you click on each one of the diamonds and get that to take you to the actual legislation and some additional reading and research, and get yourself up to speed on those little bits of legislation there. Please read the summaries and the overviews. Don't go away and read a whole act, because you won't understand it and it will take you forever. So just make sure you got a nice overview there. Okay, right. 2.1 is summarise the main points of legislation and procedures covering confidentiality, data protection and the disclosure of information. Okay, now here we're just asking you to summarise, so just give us that overview, all right, in the same way that I've asked you to read the summary and the overview of those little bits of legislation and acts that we discussed earlier. If we're thinking about data protection and we're thinking about confidentiality and disclosure information, we're thinking really about a few key pieces of legislation. The Data Protection Act, if you mention the Data Protection Act now, you have to add in the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, as you'll be familiar with, 2018. So just make sure that you get your years right there. We've got the Data Protection Act, 1998, and then the GDPR added another layer onto that in 2018. Human Rights Act, we want you to look at working together to safeguard children and keeping children safe in education, and the Children's Act. So give us a summary of those bits of legislation and specifically how that relates to confidentiality, data protection and disclosure of information. How does that translate into working policies and procedures for you within your school? Okay. Right, at the end of the PowerPoint, there is a nice little checklist for you, and it's really useful for you to go ahead and work through those questions. You don't need to write them down, it's not an exercise for you to do, but just make sure that you feel confident that with a little bit of reading and research that you could answer those questions, because if you can, then you're absolutely going to be able to complete this assignment without any issues. So we're asking, what's the difference between legislation and statutory guidance? If you go to the videos that were updated last week, that's going to give you a little bit of information on that there. Remember that tier. So the Legislation Act at the top, that drips down into statutory guidance so that we can read the act and actually understand it. Then that statutory guidance falls down into our policies and procedures. Okay, so that's how we implement that guidance. What word is given to a series of step-by-step instructions that you may find within a policy? Well, that is procedures, isn't it? That's what we're actually doing on the shop floor, so to speak. Who might you need to report a serious accident to? Health and Safety Executive through Riddle. What piece of legislation means it's okay to break confidentiality if you're worried that a child may be abused? Now, what to do if you're worried that a child is being abused, would have that in there. Keeping children safe in education. Okay, so there's going to be a few key bits of legislation that are going to give you a nod to that information in that question there. What law protects your personal information? We've got the Data Protection Act, and then we've got GDPR. How does your setting use this law to protect children's personal information? GDPR. Right, that's right there for you there. And name 2 of your responsibilities as an employee under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Okay, have a little think about that. Have a little think about making sure environments are safe, knowing who to report it to, removing risks that are reasonable, following risk assessment. Okay, think about those things. Okay, just before I go then, I want to give you an explanation of some of those command verbs that exist within this criteria. We've got an explain that's popping up in a few of the criteria listed. When we ask you to explain something, we want you to provide detail and information about the subject, giving reasons how or why. Responses could include examples to support these reasons. I like to use the magic rule of 3 when it comes to an explain criteria. 3 examples usually helps you to give a really good explain. Identify, recognise and name the main points accurately. So it's more than just a bullet point list, all right? You can use bullet points if you find that beneficial for you, but make sure you're giving like a very brief summary, a few sentences as an absolute minimum, to just name those main points. And summarise, give the main ideas or facts in a concise way. So no waffling allowed when it comes to a summarise. Just give us that clear bit of information, get it all wrapped up nice, okay? I'd say a paragraph gives you a really nice summary if you get all the key points popped in there. Okay, right, I'm going to stop waffling. Please come to me on Teams chat if you need any more advice and guidance. And just as a little bit of a recap on that assignment brief, the assignment brief is on Moodle. What I think is perfectly acceptable for you to do, and I would do if it was me, would be to copy and paste the criteria that's on there, pop it in a Word document and answer that almost as in a workbook style, as a question and answer round. If you love writing an essay and you feel that you've got the time and you've got the motivation to do that, that's absolutely fine too. Okay, and just on another note, we appreciate that this is a really difficult time for everybody. There is absolutely no pressure, okay? And there's no expectation that anybody is sitting at home able to just breeze through these assignments, or that anybody's got additional time to dedicate to this right now. So if any of you are stuck, please, please, please let us know. We are here to support you. We are in the same boat ourselves, trying to find a way to get work done and carry on with life as normal. Okay, so please don't be shy. Talk to us if you're struggling in any way. We want everybody to feel that they can still tap into and engage in their learning without feeling overwhelming pressure when it comes to getting assignments in. All right, we'll carry on as normal as much as we possibly can, but please don't be a stranger if there's something that you want to discuss further. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.